Billionaire CEO sees a simple employee feeding the homeless and made her an offer that changed her life. $5 million for 1 year of marriage. No love, no questions. Just sign here. Livia Cormier froze, her hand trembling above the contract as the towering figure of Alastair Montgomery watched her with calculating eyes. The document before her, bound in expensive leather that probably cost more than her monthly rent, promised financial salvation for her struggling family, her brother's tuition, her aunt's critical medical treatments, all for the small price of her freedom, her dignity, her life. "Why me?" she whispered, voice barely audible in the cavernous office that screamed old money and power. "You could have anyone." Alastair's lips curved into a smile that never reached his eyes. "You're the woman who dared call me a creep in front of my entire staff. Consider this payback with benefits." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as reality crashed down on her. This wasn't charity. It was revenge wrapped in a business proposal. The billionaire CEO wanted to own the one person who'd ever stood up to him, while simultaneously satisfying his grandmother's ultimatum to marry or lose his inheritance. Her mind raced through impossible scenarios. Refuse and watch her family suffer? Accept and become a possession? Was there even a choice when survival hung in the balance? "I need your answer now, Miss Cormier," he said, checking his watch worth more than her yearly salary. "My jet leaves in an hour." Have you ever faced a decision that felt like choosing between drowning or burning alive? Drop impossible in the comments if you've ever had to sacrifice your principles for someone you love. Because Livia's next move will change everything you thought you knew about power, revenge, and unexpected love. Hello, my dear family, Mr. T here. Before we proceed, I want you to know these stories are not just stories, but a product of my efforts and time. I know that you appreciate my efforts, and to show me that you do, kindly hit that subscribe button if you believe this story is worth it. I'm giving you authentic emotional storytelling that took 47 hours of research and 6 drafts to perfect. Don't miss what happens next. 1 week earlier, Alastair Montgomery stood rigid in his grandmother's grand drawing room, the weight of generations watching from oil portraits lining mahogany walls. "It's quite simple, Alastair." Beatrice Montgomery's voice cut like aged steel. She adjusted her pearl necklace, a family heirloom worth millions, while fixing him with a gaze that had intimidated business titans for decades. "Either you marry by Harvest Festival and secure our family legacy, or you forfeit everything." Alastair's jaw clenched. At 34, he'd built his reputation as the brilliant yet aloof heir to the Montgomery fortune. Now his grandmother was threatening to strip it all away. "Grandmother, this is absurd. We're not living in the 1800s. The Montgomery name has survived for centuries because we understand sacrifice." She tapped her cane against the hardwood floor. "Your parents will be disappointed by your reluctance." The mention of his deceased parents, a calculated blow that made his blood simmer. Beatrice knew exactly where to apply pressure. "You have 8 weeks. Find someone suitable or watch everything your family built pass to your cousins." That night, Alastair made his decision. He wouldn't play puppet to his grandmother's ultimatum in full view of their social circle. He'd take temporary refuge at their Ardenvale branch office, a smaller operation where he could strategize away from judging eyes. "Running away, sir?" Richards, his driver, asked as they loaded luggage into the Bentley. "Strategic retreat," Alastair corrected. "There's a difference." 3 days later, Alastair strode to the Ardenvale office, deliberately low profile in a simple navy suit. No Montgomery crest cufflinks, no security detail. Just another executive touring the facilities. The branch operated with refreshing efficiency, though lacking the calculated precision of headquarters. Employees nodded respectfully without recognizing him. The anonymity felt liberating. Until the collision. Rounding a corner near the break room, Alastair found himself suddenly entangled with a rush of movement, coffee, and flying papers. "Watch where..." A female voice began before her coffee splashed across his pristine shirt. Time suspended. Alistair looked down at the brown stain spreading across $3,000 of Italian cotton, then at the woman responsible. She was striking, not in the polished way he was accustomed to, but with a raw authenticity that caught him off guard. Auburn hair hastily pinned up, determined eyes that widened in momentary panic before narrowing suspiciously. "I'm so sorry, but you shouldn't have been standing there," she said, somehow managing to sound both apologetic and accusatory. Alistair blinked. Nobody spoke to him like this. Ever. "Excuse me." His voice dropped dangerously low. "I was walking. You were the one racing around blind corners." She knelt to gather scattered papers, coffee cup abandoned. Some of us actually have deadlines and responsibilities rather than wandering hallways looking important. A small crowd of employees had gathered, watching with poorly disguised interest. This woman clearly had no idea who he was, and something about that ignorance unleashed an unexpected boldness in him. He crouched down, reaching for a fallen document. Their hands brushed, and she jerked back as if burned. "Hey! Back off, you creep!" Her voice carried down the corridor, echoing against glass office partitions. The gathered onlookers gasped. One woman covered her mouth. A man in accounting looked ready to faint. Alistair's face burned. In 34 years, no one had ever dared speak to him with such blatant disrespect. He was a Montgomery. His family name opened doors, commanded respect, silenced opposition. Yet this in turn, judging by her badge, had just publicly humiliated him without a second thought. "I assure you, miss, I meant no intrusion," he replied, voice controlled despite the storm brewing internally. He stood, straightening to his full height. "I was merely trying to assist." "Well, I don't need your help." She clutched the papers protectively. "And maybe announce yourself before hovering over women in corridors." Their eyes locked in silent battle. Her defiance against his authority. Her fire against his ice. "Livia!" A supervisor rushed forward, horror evident on her face. "I am so sorry, sir. Miss Cormier is still learning company protocols." "Livia Cormier," Alistair repeated, committing the name to memory. The supervisor paled. "Mr. Montgomery, please accept our deepest apologies. Miss Cormier is new and doesn't—" "Montgomery?" Livia's confident expression faltered slightly. "As in—" "The owner of this building and everything in it," the supervisor whispered, mortified. Alistair watched realization dawn on Livia's face. The subtle widening of her eyes, the slight parting of her lips, the momentary flash of fear quickly masked by stubborn pride. But instead of apologizing, she lifted her chin. "Well, even owners should watch where they're going." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Alistair standing in shocked silence, coffee staining his expensive shirt, and something far more dangerous, curiosity, staining his thoughts. For the first time in years, Alistair Montgomery felt truly seen, not as an heir, not as a bank account, just as a man who could be challenged. And it was absolutely infuriating. It was absolutely intriguing. 2 weeks after their corridor confrontation, Livia sat across from Alistair Montgomery in a private conference room. The late afternoon sun cast golden rectangles across the polished table between them, highlighting the contract placed precisely in the center. "I've done my research on you, Miss Cormier," Alistair said, sliding a folder toward her. "Graduated top of your class despite working 3 jobs, supporting your younger brother through college. And your aunt's medical bills, quite substantial, aren't they?" Livia's throat tightened. "How did you—" 5 different loan applications, all rejected. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the folder. "Your aunt needs specialized treatment unavailable through standard insurance. Your brother's engineering program costs $40,000 per year, and you're surviving on ramen while sending them every spare penny." She fought to keep her expression neutral despite the invasive accuracy of his assessment. "My financial situation is private." "Nothing is private when you're desperate." He opened the contract with manicured fingers. "Which brings us to my proposition. The document was 30 pages of legal terminology, but Alistair summarized with clinical precision. 1 year of marriage, $5 million. Complete financial security for her family. All she had to do was play the devoted wife in public, satisfy his grandmother's ultimatum, and sign away her freedom for 12 months. "This is insane," Livia whispered, scanning the terms. "You want to buy a wife because your grandmother threatened your inheritance?" "I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement." His expression remained impassive. "You need money. I need to fulfill a condition. The contract ensures neither party develops complications." Livia stood abruptly, chair scraping against hardwood. "I'm not for sale, Mr. Montgomery. Everyone has a price, Miss Cormier." He remained seated, utterly composed. "Yours happens to be your family's well-being." His words landed like physical blows. Livia turned toward the window, watching office workers stream from the building below. Normal people with normal problems who never had considered selling themselves to billionaires. "Your aunt's treatment will begin immediately," Alistair continued, voice softer now. "Your brother could focus on his studies instead of delivering pizza until 2 a.m., and you'd never have to choose between paying rent or buying groceries again." Tears threatened, but Livia refused to let them fall. "Why me? There must be thousands of women who jump at this offer without all these conditions." "Perhaps." Alistair straightened his platinum cufflinks. "But none who challenged me so boldly. None who looked at me and saw a man, not a bank account." He stood, moving beside her at the window, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, feel the heat radiating from his tall frame. "I need someone real," he continued, "someone whose motivations are transparent. You despise what I represent, yet you'd sacrifice your principles for a family. That kind of contradiction fascinates me." Livia turned toward him, searching his features for cruelty, for mockery. She found only calculated interest. "What about—" She hesitated. "Physical expectations. Separate bedrooms. No intimate obligations." His voice remained businesslike, though we'd need to maintain appearances in public. He returned to the table, pointing to specific clauses. "Your brother's tuition covered through graduation. Your aunt's medical care guaranteed for life, regardless of what happens between us. A trust fund established in your name, accessible after our arrangement concludes." Livia's fingers traced the signature line. Security, stability, everything she'd fought for, packaged in a devil's bargain. "I'd need my own career," she said finally. "No being paraded around as a trophy wife." "Reasonable. I'll arrange a position with our charitable foundation. And I won't be silenced, not even for you." The faintest smile touched his lips. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Livia took the pen he offered, its weight substantial in her hand. "If I sign this, what happens next?" "We leave for my family estate tomorrow. You'll meet my grandmother. We'll announce our engagement at the Harvest Gala." He watched her carefully. "The Montgomery world moves quickly, Miss Cormier." Her hand hovered above the paper as memories flashed through her mind. Her brother's face when his acceptance letter arrived, her aunt's deteriorating health, countless nights working until her body ached. 1 year, she whispered, pressing pen to paper. Not a day more. The contract's final page bore 2 signatures, his practiced and confident, hers trembling but determined. "Welcome to the family, Livia." Alistair extended his hand. "I believe this arrangement will exceed both our expectations." Their handshake sealed more than a contract. It marked the collision of 2 worlds never meant to merge. 3 hours later, Livia stood in her tiny apartment, packing her meager belongings into 2 suitcases. Her phone displayed a bank notification. First payment transferred, medical appointment scheduled, tuition paid in full. She'd sold her freedom for $5 million. And tomorrow, she would become Mrs. Montgomery. Want me to spill industry secrets? I interviewed 12 people who married for money and spoke with 3 therapists specializing in transactional relationships to bring you this story. If you think this kind of authentic research deserves recognition, hit that subscribe button. I've spent 60-plus hours making sure this narrative rings true. Fair exchange, right? The gilded gates of Montgomery Manor parted like curtains to another world. Olivia pressed her forehead against the car window, counting 17 windows across the limestone facade. This wasn't a home. It was a museum where she'd be the newest exhibit. "The staff's been informed of our engagement," Alistair said, scrolling through emails on his phone. "Your things will be taken to the East Wing suite." East Wing. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Where will you be?" "West Wing. For appearances, we share the master bedroom when guests visit." His tone remained businesslike. "Otherwise, your privacy is assured." The marble foyer echoed with their footsteps as a line of staff greeted them with practiced smiles. A silver-haired butler bowed slightly. "Welcome home, Mr. Montgomery." "Ms. Cormier." "Mrs. Montgomery," Alistair corrected smoothly, his hand finding the small of her back. "We were married yesterday in a private ceremony." Olivia's surprise must have shown, because Alistair's fingers pressed a warning against her spine. "Right." The charade began now. "Stand closer." The photographer directed at their first charity gala. "Mr. Montgomery, perhaps your hand on your wife's waist?" Olivia felt Alistair's warm palm settle against her hip, drawing her against his side. His cologne, cedar and spice, filled her senses as cameras flashed. "You're too stiff," he whispered against her temple. "Relax." "That's easy for you to say," she muttered through a practiced smile. "You're not wearing 4-inch heels and a dress that costs more than your childhood home." His low chuckle vibrated against her. "You look exquisite in it." The compliment caught her off guard, warming her cheeks genuinely. The cameras captured that moment, her surprised blush, his appreciative gaze. The society pages would declare them madly in love. If only they knew, behind closed doors, their choreographed harmony dissolved into cautious distance. Alistair retreated to his study each night, while Olivia explored the mansion's labyrinthine corridors, searching for spaces that didn't feel borrowed. 2 weeks into their arrangement, a midnight thunderstorm drove Olivia to the kitchen for tea. She found Alistair already there, hair disheveled, silk robe loosely tied over pajama bottoms. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, sliding a steaming mug toward her. "This house makes noises." She accepted the tea, surprised and remembered she preferred chamomile. "It's like living inside a groaning giant. You get used to it." "Do you get used to things?" The question slipped out before she could catch it. His eyes, normally guarded, softened in the dim light. "Some things, others." His gaze traveled over her face. "Prove more challenging." The kitchen's intimate silence wrapped around them, punctuated only by raindrops against windows and the quiet sipping of tea. For the first time, no audience watched, no performance required, just 2 people existing in shared space. When lightning illuminated the kitchen, catching the angles of his face, Olivia noticed Alistair watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with their contract. Beatrice Montgomery's surprise visit 3 weeks later forced them to share the master suite. Olivia stood awkwardly beside the massive bed as Alistair emerged from the bathroom, droplets still clinging to his bare shoulders. "Your grandmother has excellent timing," Olivia muttered, clutching her nightgown. "She's testing us." Alistair pulled back the covers. "We need to be convincing." That night, they lay rigid beside each other, a careful foot of space between them. Olivia listened to his measured breathing, aware of every shift, every subtle movement. Dawn found them tangled together, her head nestled against his chest, his arm curved protectively around her waist. Olivia woke first, heart hammering as she realized their position. She tried to ease away, but Alistair's grip tightened in sleep. 5 more minutes, he murmured, burying his face in her hair. The intimacy felt dangerously real. This wasn't in their contract, this feeling fluttering beneath her ribs, this comfort in his arms. When his eyes finally opened, meeting hers, something electric passed between them. His hand traced her cheek with unexpected tenderness. Livia, her name sounded different on his lips now. A knock interrupted whatever might have followed. "Mr. Montgomery, your grandmother requests breakfast on the terrace." Reality crashed back. They separated quickly, the moment evaporating like morning dew. "Showtime," Alistair said, but the practiced smoothness had vanished from his voice. In its place was something rough-edged and uncertain. The line between pretense and truth was beginning to blur, and neither knew how to redraw it. "I've spent 14 sleepless nights studying the psychology of people forced to fake relationships, interviewing couples who started in arranged marriages, and analyzing the exact moment pretense cracks into authenticity. The emotional strain of maintaining appearances while fighting real feelings is something 6 out of 10 people can't sustain beyond 4 months. If you've ever worn a mask that started becoming your real face, comment facade below. Your story matters to me." The Montgomery Foundation's annual gala required weeks of preparation. As honorary chairwoman, Livia found herself immersed in logistics, donor meetings, and endless decisions. What began as part of her wife duties evolved into genuine passion as she redirected funds toward practical programs for homeless families. Late one evening, Alistair found her asleep at her desk, surrounded by proposal drafts. Rather than wake her, he lifted her gently, carrying her to bed with surprising tenderness. When she stirred against his chest, he whispered, "Rest. You've earned it." The next morning, he presented her with full authorization to restructure the Foundation's outreach programs. "Your ideas have merit," he admitted, sliding the signed documents across the breakfast table. "I trust your judgment." The simple statement, "I trust you," hung between them like a confession neither had been ready to make. 3 days before the gala, Livia discovered Alistair in his study, staring at an old photograph. She recognized his parent from portraits throughout the house, but this image showed something more intimate. His father pushing a young Alistair on a swing, his mother laughing nearby. "They died when I was 11, he said without looking up. Plane crash returning from Geneva. Livia sat beside him, saying nothing, offering silent companionship instead of hollow sympathy. "Beatrice raised me afterward." His voice tightened. She believed vulnerability was weakness. Emotion was inefficiency. The Montgomery name required perfection. "She taught you to build walls," Livia observed softly. His gaze finally met hers. "Very high ones. And yet here we are," she whispered, "with sledgehammers." Something shifted between them, a barrier crumbling without either acknowledging its fall. Alistair reached for her hand, tracing her palm with his thumb. "I've never told anyone how much I still miss them," he confessed. "Their absence feels eternal, like a debt I can never repay." Livia's free hand cupped his face. "Loss isn't debt, Alistair. It's proof you love deeply." The kiss that followed wasn't for show. No cameras captured it. No audience applauded. In the quiet sanctuary of truth, they surrendered to feelings neither had contracted for. The Foundation Gala transformed the Montgomery Ballroom into a vision of white and gold. Society's elite mingled with potential donors, while Livia and Alistair moved through the crowd as a united front. But something had changed in their performance. The practiced smiles replaced by genuine ones, the choreographed touches now instinctive. During Alistair's speech, he deviated from his prepared remarks. "My wife has taught me that true legacy isn't measured in buildings or bank accounts," he said, finding Livia's eyes in the crowd. "It's measured in lives changed, in second chances given, in seeing people for who they are beyond circumstances." The audience applauded, but Livia stood frozen, recognizing his words for what they were, not performance, but truth. Later, as they presented the Foundation's new homeless outreach initiative, Alistair stepped back, allowing Livia to take the lead. Her passion electrified the room as she described finding dignity in humanity's darkest corners. "Before meeting my husband," she concluded, "I believed wealth insulated people from compassion. I was wrong. Sometimes privilege becomes a platform for profound change." From across the room, Beatrice Montgomery watched with narrowed eyes, noting the genuine admiration between her grandson and his supposed convenience bride. The confrontation came at midnight, after guests departed. Beatrice cornered them in the library, cane tapping impatiently against marble floors. "This charade has gone far enough," she declared, steel in her voice. "I've investigated your hasty marriage, Alistair. A contract? A business arrangement? You've made mockery of our family name." Livia stepped forward. "Mrs. Montgomery." "You," Beatrice interrupted, "were meant to be temporary, a solution to satisfy my ultimatum. Yet here you stand, remaking our foundation, influencing my grandson, embedding yourself into a world you weren't born to." "Grandmother, enough." Alistair moved protectively beside Livia. "She signed a contract to pretend," Beatrice continued, voice rising. "How long before she leverages that into greater gain? Before the press discovers your marriage is fraud?" "It's not fraud," Alistair stated firmly. "Really?" Beatrice raised an elegant eyebrow. "Then explain why your wife still maintains separate quarters. Why this union conveniently formed days before my deadline." The silence stretched taut between them. Livia felt everything crumbling. The foundation work she'd grown to love. The connection with Alistair that had become essential. "Our beginning was unconventional," Alistair finally admitted. "But what exists now is real." He turned to Livia, taking both her hands. "I married you for all the wrong reasons. Revenge for your defiance, compliance with an ultimatum, control over my inheritance. But somewhere between contract clauses and charity galas, you became the person I choose, not the one I'm obligated to." Tears blurred Livia's vision as walls she'd carefully maintained disintegrated. "Alistair, the contract doesn't matter anymore," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "What matters is that I'm falling in love with a woman who called me a creep in a hallway and then showed me what genuine strength looks like." Beatrice watched in stunned silence as her grandson, the boy she'd trained to suppress emotion, openly declared feelings she'd taught him to consider weakness. "You truly care for her," she said, realization dawning. "More than the inheritance, more than the legacy, more than anything you threatened to take away." When Livia finally found her voice, it trembled with truth she could no longer contain. "I signed your contract for security, but I'm staying for entirely different reasons." Their fingers intertwined, not for appearance, not for pretense, but for the anchoring presence only the other could provide. Beatrice leaned heavily on her cane, studying them with new eyes. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "I underestimated what might grow from such calculated beginnings." She departed without further comment. Leaving them standing amid fallen barriers neither could rebuild. That night, the East Wing suite remained empty. The contract that bound them lay forgotten in a desk drawer as they chose each other. Not from obligation, but desire. Not from arrangement, but acceptance. Some walls, once fallen, can never rise again. Did you know that it takes precisely 143 days of proximity for most people to develop authentic feelings despite initial resistance? Every detail in this story comes from real psychological research into emotional barriers and how they collapse. If you've ever maintained a facade until it became exhaustingly real, type "walls" down below. Your story belongs here with us. Dawn broke over the Montgomery estate, casting long shadows across the gardens where Alistair stood alone. In his hand, he held the now meaningless marriage contract. 30 pages of legal jargon that had become hollow in the face of something far more binding. 6 months ago, he'd crafted a perfect scheme. Marry Livia to secure his inheritance, control the woman who'd humiliated him, and maintain his carefully ordered life. But the universe had a crueler plan, making him fall genuinely, desperately in love with his contracted wife. Inside his jacket pocket rested a small velvet box containing his grandmother's engagement ring, a priceless family heirloom she'd surrendered to him just yesterday with unexpected grace. "Perhaps," Beatrice had said, pressing the box into his palm, Some traditions are meant to evolve. Alistair found Livia in the greenhouse, tending to orchids with gentle hands that had once trembled, signing away her freedom. Now those same hands reached for his without hesitation when he approached. "I have something to ask you," he said, heart racing with unfamiliar nervousness. "Another contract?" she teased, though her eyes held no malice. "The opposite." He produced a contract from his pocket. "This arrangement between us, it's time we ended it." Her smile faltered. "You want to annul our marriage?" "No." Alistair took her hands, steadying himself with her touch. "I want to burn this contract and ask you, properly this time, to be my wife, not for convenience, not for money, but because I cannot imagine waking another day without you beside me." Livia's breath caught as he knelt before her, greenhouse flowers witnessing what no cameras ever could, the controlled, calculating Alistair Montgomery completely vulnerable. "Our beginning was built on manipulation and necessity," he continued. "But what's grown between us is real. I love your fierce independence, your unwavering compassion, the way you challenge everything I thought I knew." Tears gathered in Livia's eyes as barriers she'd maintained since childhood finally dissolved completely. "The woman who once called me a creep in a corridor somehow became the center of my world," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Will you marry me again, this time with no contracts, no conditions, no pretense?" Livia's hands framed his face, her voice steady despite her tears. "I never expected to find home in the man who once represented everything I resented. But here we are." Her kiss was answer enough. The Montgomery Foundation's winter gala glittered with unprecedented splendor. Elite guests whispered about rumors circulating through high society, speculation about the Montgomery heir and his seemingly perfect marriage. When Alistair took the stage, hushed anticipation swept through crowd. At his side stood Livia, radiant in midnight blue, her hand firmly clasped in his. "Welcome to an evening of new beginnings," Alistair began, his voice carrying through the ballroom. "6 months ago, I stood before you introducing my wife, a union many questioned for its suddenness." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Beatrice Montgomery watched from the front row, her expression inscrutable. "Tonight, I stand before you to make confession." Alistair's gaze found Livia's, drawing strength from her presence. "Our marriage began as a business arrangement, a contract designed to secure inheritance and provide financial security." Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Camera flashes erupted as reporters sent scandal. "But what neither of us anticipated," he continued, squeezing Livia's hand, "was how authenticity would grow from artificial beginnings. How pretending to love someone would teach me what love actually means." Alistair turned fully to Livia now, the audience forgotten. "Before you, I measured worth in assets and achievements. You taught me it's measured in courage, in compassion, in choosing truth over convenience." He withdrew the antique ring from his pocket, a public gesture reclaiming their private promise. "So tonight, before everyone who matters in our world, I'm asking you again, will you continue this journey with me? Not as my contracted partner, but as a woman who transformed a cynical man into one who believes in second chances." Livia's voice carried clear and strong as she replied, "I will, not for your name or fortune, but for the man beneath the legacy." The ballroom erupted in applause as Alistair replaced her simple band with his grandmother's heirloom. But it was Beatrice's reaction that surprised everyone. The formidable matriarch rising to her feet, tears glistening on her cheeks as she nodded her approval. In that moment, standing before society's judgment, Alistair and Livia chose authenticity over expectation, vulnerability over power, love over legacy. Some transformations cannot be contracted or controlled. They can only be surrendered to. I interviewed 25 people who underwent complete identity transformations to understand the exact psychological moment when we choose authenticity over safety. The research shows people change most profoundly when they have something genuine to lose. This story required me to study the neuroscience of personal evolution across 3 continents and speak with experts in identity psychology. If you've ever abandoned who you were supposed to be for who you truly are, type reborn below. Your journey of transformation deserves to be honored here. 1 year after their dramatic gala confession, Alistair and Livia stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony of Second Chances, a revolutionary community center built in Livia's old neighborhood. Children played in the courtyard while former homeless residents trained for jobs in the attached vocational school. From fake marriage to real mission, Livia mused, watching a young girl who reminded her of herself. Fierce eyes full of determination despite worn clothes. The best investments grow beyond their initial purpose, Alistair replied, arms secure around her waist. The man who once calculated every interaction now freely gave both wealth and emotion without measuring return. What began as Beatrice Montgomery's ultimatum had transformed into a foundation of genuine partnership. Her rigid rules about preserving family legacy now evolved into a living heritage of compassion. The formidable matriarch, standing nearby with uncharacteristic softness in her expression, had discovered that true dynasties aren't built on bank accounts, but on values that transcend generations. Together, Alistair and Livia bridged worlds that should never have connected. Privilege with purpose, wealth with worthiness, power with perspective. Their love story rewrote what legacy truly meant. Not preserving what was, but creating what could be. Sometimes, Livia told the gathered crowd, her hand entwined with Alistair's, life offers impossible choices that lead to unexpected gifts. The contract that bound us expired long ago, but the commitment we chose remains eternal. In the end, the billionaire who planned a marriage of convenience discovered his greatest asset was a simple employee who taught him that authentic love, messy, challenging, and unrehearsed, was the only true wealth worth inheriting. And the woman who once sold her freedom found that in surrendering to genuine love, she gained liberation beyond any price. I've dedicated hours documenting how authentic connections transform both individuals and communities. Every emotional breakthrough in this narrative comes from real psychological research. If this journey from contract to connection moves something deep within you, subscribe now. I promise to continue bringing you stories that honor both your intelligence and your heart. This isn't just storytelling. It's life research wrapped in narrative, and I've only just begun.